I almost didn't pick up. I had a deadline in 2 hours, my coffee had gone cold, I had been ignoring calls all morning, and the number on the screen was one I didn't recognize, and for half a second I looked at it and thought, voicemail. I picked up anyway. I don't know why. The specific anxiety that comes from losing a parent and never quite being able to let a call go, just in case, that's the closest I can get to explaining it. The woman on the line said her name was Grace, that she was a teller at a branch 40 miles away, that she was calling with a routine address confirmation before processing a large disbursement. I gave her my address. She said, "Anne, can you confirm you're currently at our branch on Millbrook Avenue?" I said, "I'm at my office. I've been here since 8. 3 seconds of silence. The specific silence of someone recalculating everything in real time. Then Grace said, very carefully, as though each word needed its own moment, "Ma'am, there is a woman at this counter right now presenting identification in your name and a check made out to you for $180,000 from the estate of..." And she said my father's name. I stood up from my desk without deciding to. My chair hit the wall behind me. I said, "Do not process that check. Keep her there. I'm calling the police." I didn't wait for her response. I grabbed my keys and I ran. The woman at that counter, with a fake ID bearing my name and a check my father had left me, was my sister, Carla. The sister who had stood beside me at our father's funeral 6 weeks earlier, who had held my hand during the service, who I had thanked at the reception afterward for being there. My father built his life the way careful people build things, steadily, without drama, through the accumulated effect of small, correct decisions made consistently over a long time. He was a construction estimator for 30 years, a man whose entire professional life was built around knowing exactly what things cost and making sure the numbers added up to what they were supposed to add up to. He brought that precision to everything. When his diagnosis came, lung cancer, late stage, 14 weeks from diagnosis to death, he did not panic. He updated his will, he sat down with his attorney, Robert, he made sure that everything he had built would go where he intended it to go. He left his estate split equally between me and Carla. I knew this, he had told me. He was that kind of person, the kind who says the thing directly, who doesn't leave people to guess, who understands that clarity is a form of kindness. His attorney, Robert, managed the probate, 8 months of paperwork, methodically completed, and then on a Friday in April, he mailed the inheritance checks. Mine was $180,000, mailed to my home address. Carla and I had always had a complicated relationship. The word complicated doing a lot of work there, covering years of tension that came down essentially to money. She had financial difficulties going back a decade. I had helped when I could. I had lent money I knew wasn't coming back and called it a gift to make the math easier. I had said yes to requests I should have examined more carefully because the alternative was a conflict I didn't have the energy for. What I had done over years, without intending to, was teach Carla a lesson I didn't mean to teach. I had taught her that what was mine was available to her if she needed it badly enough and pushed hard enough. She had learned it very well. And sometime in the weeks before the check arrived, while I was still in the active, consuming grief of having just lost my father, while I was writing a eulogy and organizing a reception and thanking people for coming and learning one day at a time what a life looks like with my father no longer in it, she had been planning this while I was doing that. I drove 40 miles in 38 minutes. I know the exact time because I looked it up afterward, because my brain had the strange impulse to document everything from the moment Grace called, as though some part of me understood that documentation was going to matter. I called Robert from the car. He said, "Call 911 first, then drive. I'll meet you." I called 911. The dispatcher took my information with the specific calm efficiency of someone who is managing a lot of calls, and this is one of them, which somehow helped me stay in the same register. I drove and I talked, and when I hung up with the dispatcher, I was already most of the way there. Here is what I was thinking on that drive, because people assume I was frantic, and I wasn't. I was in the specific state of clarity that arrives sometimes in crisis, when your brain decides the situation requires precision and switches into it completely, the way a camera focuses. I was thinking in a straight line. Carla has a fake ID with my name on it, she has my father's check, she drove 40 miles to a branch where she calculated she wouldn't run into anyone who knew either of us. She has been planning this. That last part, the planning, cut deepest on that drive. Not the money, not even the betrayal exactly. The planning. A fake ID is not an impulse. You find a source, you submit a photo, you provide the information, you wait for it to be made, you receive it. Days at minimum. She had been doing that while I was in the early weeks of the worst loss of my life, while I was writing a eulogy and organizing a reception and thanking people for coming and learning one day at a time what a life looks like with my father no longer in it. She had been planning this while I was doing that. I arrived at the branch at 3:17 p.m. 2 police officers were already inside. I pushed through the glass door and scanned the room and found her, Carla, my sister, sitting in a chair near the manager's office, with the expression of someone who has been caught in the middle of a calculation they were certain would work. We made eye contact across the room. She looked away first. The manager walked me through what had happened in a small office with a glass door through which I could see Carla in her chair, not looking at me. Carla had arrived at 2:45 p.m. with my inheritance check and a driver's license bearing my complete identifying information, a professional fake, the kind that costs real money, that passes a rapid inspection, that required someone to plan it weeks in advance. She had presented the check and the license together and asked to cash it. Grace, relatively new, following verification protocols exactly as written, had asked for an address confirmation on a disbursement of that size. She had dialed the number on file, my number. In those first seconds, Grace had not registered the significance of what she was hearing. She had continued through her script, confirmed the payer, mentioned the amount. It was only when I said, "I'm not in front of you," that her brain did the calculation. She had excused herself, she had flagged her manager, she had kept Carla at the counter with the practiced calm of someone working very hard to seem like nothing was wrong. I asked the manager if Grace was okay. I could see her through the glass at her station, and she looked like someone who had had a very long 40 minutes. The manager said she was fine, a little shaken that she'd done everything correctly. I said, "Can someone tell her she saved me $180,000 today?" The manager said he would make sure she knew. Robert arrived 15 minutes after me. He put his hand briefly on my shoulder when he came into the office, a small gesture I found I needed more than I would have anticipated. I gave my statement to the police. I was precise and factual. I described the check, the estate timeline, the relation. I described Carla, who I had known for 34 years, who I was grateful for 6 weeks earlier for showing up. I did not let my voice break until I was in my car in the parking lot afterward, alone, doors closed, parked in a space I didn't remember choosing.
Carla was charged that afternoon. Identity fraud, attempted theft by deception, possession of a forged document. She did not make bail that night. Robert called me the following morning. He asked whether I wanted to cooperate with the prosecution actively or allow the DA's office to handle it without my direct involvement. I said, "I'm cooperating fully." He asked if I had thought about what a trial would mean, the timeline, the exposure, sitting in a courtroom and testifying against my sister. I said, "My father spent 40 years building what he left me. He was precise about it. He left it to me through a specific, documented process because he wanted it to me. What Carla did was not an impulse. It was a plan, and plans deserve a response." Robert said, "I want to tell you something about the timing of the fake ID." I said, "Tell me." He said, "The investigators ran the source. The ID was ordered approximately 6 weeks before the check was mailed, while your father's estate was still in probate." 6 weeks before the check arrived. She had known the check was coming. We both knew the timeline from Robert's communications, and she had ordered the ID, and she had waited, and when the check arrived, she had moved. 6 weeks before, while I was still going through the specific, terrible dailiness of early grief, still waking up each morning and having to relearn for a few seconds before remembering that he was gone. She had been, during that same period, in possession of a fake ID with my name on it and a plan for what to do when the check arrived. I said, "I want to cooperate fully." The trial was 9 months after the arrest. I sat in the witness stand for 2 hours. The defense argued grief-driven desperation, financial crisis, temporary loss of judgment, a plan to replace the money. The prosecutor asked them to address the fake ID. You don't order a fake ID in the same afternoon you make an impulsive decision. You order it weeks in advance, which means you've been thinking about it, which means the decision is not temporary. The jury took 4 hours, guilty on all 3 counts. The check, held by the bank from the moment Grace made her call, never processed, was released to me during the final estate accounting, $180,000, in an account with my name on it, the way my father intended. I sat in my car in the bank parking lot when the transfer confirmed on my phone, the same parking lot where 9 months earlier I had sat in the dark after giving my police statement, doors closed, finally letting myself feel what the day had been. I sat in that same lot and looked at the confirmation on my screen and thought about a man who spent 40 years building something carefully, who told me directly that it was mine, who went to the trouble of updating a will and sitting with an attorney and making sure that the numbers added up, and whose numbers, in the end, did add up because a teller named Grace followed a protocol on a Tuesday afternoon and called the number on file. Some things arrive where they were sent. It just sometimes requires more than it should. Carla has been out for several months. We have not spoken. She sent a letter during her sentence. I read it. She said she was sorry. She said she hadn't expected to be caught, and that sentence, more than any other in the letter, was the most honest thing she wrote, more honest than she probably intended. She said she had been in debt I didn't know about. She said she had convinced herself I wouldn't really miss it, that I would be upset but ultimately fine, that the amount in the context of the full estate was survivable, as though the amount were the point. What I keep returning to is not the money, it is the 6 weeks. The ID ordered while I was in early grief, while she was calling me to check in, while she was performing the role of the sister who shows up. She was doing both things at once, being present for me and building the mechanism to take from me. And the distance between those two things is where I keep getting stuck, not because I can't understand desperation, but because doing both at once requires a kind of compartmentalization I don't know how to look at directly and hold. I keep the transfer confirmation in my phone's photo roll. My father's name is in the description field, the estate name, the way Robert had it documented. I scroll past it sometimes. It still makes me stop, not with anger anymore, with something more like gratitude for the teller who followed the protocol, for Robert who met me there, for the phone call I almost let go to voicemail. The money is for what it was always for. My father said so. He put it in writing. He was that kind of person, precise, intentional, the kind who makes sure the numbers add up. His numbers added up. In the end, they did. Subscribe to Family Verdict for a new family betrayal story every week. If a family member has ever tried to take something with your name on it, tell me what happened in the comments below. I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for watching.